Hello, I'm Diana Lovejoy. Welcome to the Organic Garden Club. Thank you for joining us tonight. The Organic Garden Club is on a mission for a better life on Earth by inspiring you to grow an organic food garden where you live. With regenerative organic speakers, tours, and workshops, we are building a community of like-minded organic food gardeners, following nature's cycle, growing organic food in our backyards without chemicals, using composts, earthrooms, pollinators, and native plants to create a balanced ecosystem and enhance the health and happiness of our members. Humanity is a part of nature, not separate from it. The trees, plants, water, and soil are relatives to be cherished. Growing your own food is the best way to a healthy lifestyle, bringing you close to nature, where you discover a new, peaceful, joyful life in the garden. Join us next Saturday, 10 a.m. for a tour of Greenwood Daylily Garden in Somas with John Sustra. Discover bright, unusual flower varieties and enjoy the beautiful vistas in his organic avocado orchard. And bring your checkbook because you'll want to buy a lot of plants. Now, I've been asking, does everybody see the chat at the bottom of the screen? Please look for it. It's at the bottom. I'd like now to introduce Dr. David White, the soil doctor from Ojai, who will talk to us about soil care, composting, compost extracts, and actively aerated compost teas. He will also tell us about his adventures with local schools. At the end of the presentation, he will answer questions, so please just start typing them into the chat. Okay, take it away, David.
All right. Thank you so much, Diana. And thumbs up if you can hear me. Just want to make sure that I'm coming through. There we go. So, love what you're doing, Diana, and I follow you on Instagram, and it's amazing the quality of information that you're putting out, and I love the whole vibe. So, I
Oh,
know
thank
that,
you.
yeah, and thank you for inviting me again to do a presentation, and I'm going to share my screen and take it away. So, from the start. Um, Continue to share. So, um, because I've given this presentation or varieties of presentations to this group, I decided to change it up a little bit today. And so I'm going to emphasize some of the work that I do in the nonprofit realm. Although I do have a business, and the main thing I do through the business, which is actually called Regenerative Designs Ojai, and the Soil Doctor is my Instagram handle. Uh, I um, I do brew actively aerated compost teas for landscapers and arborists, and I consult and I do teaching too. So I do a variety of things through the business, but you will see that my name comes up on the screen as The Crew, and The Crew is a non-profit that I run my educational programs through. So let's go back in time a little bit, and hopefully, let's see. Oh, for some reason, it's not. Oh, there we go. That's okay. So, back in Scotland in the 1960s, I am from Scotland. Sometimes I give a presentation, and the first question I get is, where are you from? So, I am from Scotland, and here I am. Hopefully, you can see it without this thing on the screen at the top. We'll move that out. But that's me taking care of the garden when I was a kid. And I certainly grew up gardening, and my family were gardeners, and they have their roots in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. My dad, here he is, grew great strawberries. We always had a huge strawberry crop. My mom would make strawberry jam, and we'd also do strawberry rhubarb jam. But that was one of my first memories as picking strawberries. My dad wrote a couple of books about the stone circles of Aberdeenshire, and this is just a plug for I do tours of stone circles in Aberdeenshire. My dad just passed last year. He was 100 years old. So he really was an inspiration for me. I went to university in Edinburgh. I was born and raised in Aberdeen, but I went to university in Edinburgh, and it's a fantastic town. Really enjoy visiting the Athens of the North. But the first place I visited in America was Ojai. And how lucky is that?
Wow.
1985, I came over here and connected with folks in Ojai, and I've lived here since 1989. So the nonprofit realm, the stuff I do through the crew, I run a program called Once Upon a Watershed. And currently, we're working with about 26 schools in Ventura County, primarily in Ojai, Ventura, and Oxnard in the Rio district. So you guys are more in the East County, but I'm sure that there's some crossovers at schools that I've worked with in the past in Thousand Oaks and that kind of area. But Once Upon a Watershed is a program of the crew, which is a nonprofit based in Ojai. It actually stands for Concerned Resource Environmental Workers, so it's a bit of an acronym. And one of the things I love to do with through the crew and connecting kids to nature is education about soils. And we'll come back to this slide later on, but this is middle school students looking at it's using a low power microscope, a dissecting scope with a fantastic camera on it, which plugs into HDMI, and they're just looking at macro invertebrates that they got by sieving compost. So anyway, before we get too much into that, I want to honor my teachers and particularly Elaine Ingham, who also passed just recently, the Queen of the Soil, and she really promoted knowledge about the soil food web. And and it's been amazing in the maybe 25 years that I've been working professionally in this realm. There's a tremendous amount of growth of information and knowledge about soils, the importance of soil biology and how plants interact with soils. So thank you very much to Elaine. On the right's Vandana Shiva, and she's the thorn in the side of Monsanto and really tremendous spokesperson for organics. And then Bill Mollison, who really was the inventor, if you like, of permaculture design. And I was very fortunate to take my permaculture design certificate with Bill in Ojai in 1997. And that really was a tremendous opportunity for me. I'm very, very grateful to have that under my belt. So here we are. I often start with students and asking, what do you see in this? And it is interesting the different responses I get, but it is interesting to consider plants having solar panels and they're just catching the sun's rays and turning it into food. And it is amazing when I say to children, it's just as if you were hungry and you went out and you sunbathed for a little bit, and then you would be like, oh, I'm full, just like plants are. So it's good to remember about the incredible ability that plants have and that they make the air we breathe. So we would not be here without plants. And so thank you to the plant kingdom. And when we think of plants and we think of trees, we tend to think of their canopies and we don't necessarily think about their roots. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on under the ground. And so it's a bit of a mystery, really, what's going on under the ground. And a lot of it is microscopic. So you really need to look at it with the microscope. And that's something that I trained up in when I was at Edinburgh and when I was at Cornell and in Idaho at universities there. I did research that was based in microscopy. So underneath the ground, if this video will work, we are having CO2 taken out of the atmosphere and pumped into the ground, and at least 40% of what they're taking in of the carbon that we're taking in is plants are putting it into the ground. And you can see in this slide that came from the Kiss the Ground folks who just won an award at the Cannes Film Festival for their latest film. that really we have to consider the ability of plants to sequester carbon in our atmosphere and to fix it, and particularly to put it into the ground. And so that when we think about uh, chemical agriculture, and I know that you guys are an organic garden club, but there's so much emphasis on NPK, right? And we've all heard about NPK because it's been rammed down our throats for 150 years, but it doesn't mention C. And C is the most important thing. It's carbon. We are carbon-based life forms, and carbon, organic, is carbon. So we have to consider the carbon that trees and all plants are taking out of the atmosphere and putting into the ground, primarily in the form of carbohydrates, of glucose. They're taking CO2 and adding it to H2O and putting it into the ground, C6H12O6, and they're feeding the ground with carbohydrates. And that's what feeds soil biology. So even if it's a plant that you really don't like, and I'm not a big fan of Bermuda grass, but it is taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground. So it's actually pejorative to call plants weeds. You should actually be calling them nature-based climate solutions, nature-based climate solutions. So that's how we should view any plant, really. And if you're taking out, what are you doing for the atmosphere if you're doing that? This is the only slide that I show with any kind of words on it. It's just important to see that as soils develop, they become more fungally dominated. So if you're trying to grow annuals, or as soils are developing, they have a lot of bacteria. And then as perennials come in and colonize, then we get soils that are more fungally dominated. So when I'm brewing compost teas, which is primarily for use on perennials, I'm brewing to make fungally dominated brews. And so I use foods that are more complex carbohydrates. If I'm trying to do something that is for annuals, then I would maybe give simpler sugars like molasses to grow more of a bacterially dominated strain. And I do have some clients that request that because they're growing annuals. Anyway, let's see. And fungi, the key thing about fungi is that they actually form the soil beds. They're forming the particles of soil. And it's so important that we understand, for instance, visualizing healthy soil as looking like dark cottage cheese. It should have little lumps in it. And the importance of that is that there's spaces between those lumps. And that's how water gets into the soil. And life is about water. So we need to have water in our soils. And so when we have uh, fungi forming these soil beds, they form spaces in between the soil beds. Water can infiltrate, and on those surfaces, that's where the soil biology will accumulate because there's water there. And if we till, for instance, then we break up that matrix that's been formed by fungi. And even though it may appear that when you run a rototiller through soil that it's fluffed it up, actually what will happen is it will compact. And so, doing that has ruined soil structure. And so really a key methodology of regenerative ag is no-till. Um, so fungi, they're saprobes. They break down things. The fungi are very important. They also can eat rocks, which is kind of amazing. I love to tell children about this. Did you realize that fungi can eat rocks? Because they can take minerals out of rocks and they can exchange them with plants. And so a very important thing that we try to get through to students is this, that reciprocity is a natural pattern. And lichens are an ideal example of this. And the way that I tell that is about Freddy fungi and Alice algae have a lichen for each other, right? And they're interacting. the fungi is able to take minerals out of the rocks and exchange them with the plant, with the algae, which is taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and forming carbohydrates. And the exchange, that's reciprocity. And that's been in existence for 400 million years. I mean, this is a successful strategy. And so making the point that reciprocity is a natural pattern that's very successful is really key. And I want to add here that I actually Googled where is the first evidence that of fungi and plants interacting, and I was so stoked that actually the first fossil evidence of fungi and plants interacting in a mycorrhizal manner is from Aberdeenshire, Scotland, where I'm from. And when I was over there in April, I went and visited the town of Rhynie, which has Rhynie cherts. And those cherts are fossilized. They had uh, hot springs there 400 million years ago, and I got to tell you, they don't have any hot springs there now. But in the Devonian, it was these sulfury limestones, hot springs, and it preserved the biology there incredibly well. And you can cut sections out of these rocks, these cherts, and look at it microscopically, and you can see the relationship between fungi and plants. So 400 million years, that's a long, long time. Very successful. So let's see if you can hear me blathering on here a bit. So today I've got my Pisolithus oryzus collection. This is Dead Man's Foot, and I collected these through the rainy season. And this was the score. I found this actually at the Matilha Dam. And what I'm going to do now is grind these so that I can add the spores to my compost tea for direct injection around the roots of coast live oak, because this fungi is the mycorrhizal ally for coast live oak. So if we take the head of the fruiting body and just grind it a bit, you can see the spores, what's coming off there that looks like smoke are the spores of this fungi. And apparently they say that these can travel through interstellar space. But these spores, 2 billion per gram of these spores. They're about 7 microns across. So they're really, really tiny. And they form the mycorrhizae, the fungal roots that give these coast live oaks the extra ability to get nutrients and fluids from their environment. Thank you, Dead Man's Foot, Pisolithus oryzus. Let's see. And then so we've got those fungal interactions with roots, but we have to remember that what's coming out of roots is liquid sun. So the root exudates. This is where the carbohydrates are coming out. This is where the biology is going to aggregate because there's food there. So that exquisite zone around the roots, that's the rhizosphere. And that's where it's all happening. That's where the food is, and that's where the biology is. And the biology is growing on that food. It's reproducing, it's excreting, it's dying, it's releasing nutrients in the area that plants need it. And I think that there really is a tremendous amount of education about this now. And as I say, Elaine Ingham, she would talk about how it was plants are creating cakes and cookies, and that the biology are coming for the cake and cookie party. And if we have had a fountain in our yards that was producing cakes and cookies, well, certainly the children would go and visit it. That's for sure. So, and of course, when you look at high quality compost under the microscope, there's a lot of biology in it. The stuff that's moving around, those are flagellates. Those are single-celled organisms, protozoa that have a tail. We also have up the middle there fungal hyphae, which is very characteristic and important. So in terms of the structure of soil, we want to see fungal hyphae, and for the vibrancy of soil around plants, we want to see active biology. And there's all sorts of biology that is building up into the soil food web, and it's based in organic residues. And it's important to point out that another natural pattern, reciprocity being one, is that nature keeps organics local. When I was a kid in the garden in Scotland, I thought that soil was formed by like somehow you dug it up and it was coming up. I didn't realize that trees form soil by dropping their leaves. And the leaves break down because of the biology in the soil, breaking it down, and they form healthy soil. And it's so important. They're called leaves because you should leave them, and it is that's creating the habitat for the web of life that's in soil. So really, these things, I'm hoping that pretty much this is not news to anybody, but some folks, it's good to review this. So really, we have a good understanding of what makes healthy soil. We want to be encouraging no-till. We want to plant annual perennials. We want to honor our fungi. We want to compost and do all these things. So everything's fine. We know what we're doing, right? Everything's fine. No problems. However, let me show you what happens at some of our local schools. We've been doing a project funded by the USDA, and it's a food reduction grant. And this is with the Rio district. And this is lunchtime, just one lunchtime at a school. And this is kids going through after they finished lunch. Observe.
Show me your tray for the video. Let's see what you got in your tray that you're not eating. Show me your tray. Show me your tray. I want to see what you're not eating. Because we want to show this to the food services people. Let's see what you're not eating. All of this going away. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So there's a lot of food waste everywhere, but food waste at schools is quite incredible. And what we're learning is that actually a lot of this is due to the food services practices. But the thing that's important when I say that nature keeps organics local, what happens with our food waste? Because of SB 1383, we now are sorting food waste. But this food waste, which is being dumped here, and you can see this student, I sat with this student, had lunch with this student, didn't like anything on his plate. I think he chewed one tomato a little bit, and then he chucked the whole thing out. And that bin, it goes to Kern County to be processed. So we're not keeping organics local here. So there's really an important chance, if you like, an opportunity to keep organics local, especially at schools. Now, if we're wanting to build vibrant, healthy schools, if we're wanting to green schools, and through the Once Upon a Watershed program, core to what we do is connecting kids to nature, we want to promote composting. Then you can see in here, one of the things that we want to avoid going into compost is plastic contaminants. They really don't want any contaminants in the food that is being processed. So several issues there, but just hundreds of pounds of food every day is wasted at schools. And that's food that could be feeding animals, or it could be, well, it can be feeding children, it can be feeding animals, and then it can be feeding our soil. So here's one of the things that we were doing. We were keeping organics local by picking up locally, and we still do have community composting programs in Ojai. And this is something that I encourage you to think about, because if you're trying to create vibrant compost, there's a lot of food waste available out there. I mean, you can't charge to pick it up because Harrison in our part of the county has the contract. But you can volunteer to pick it up, and we do pick it up from other nonprofits like Help of Ojai has a food pantry. They get food donated. A lot of it is near to the end of its viable life as a human food, and we end up composting some of it. And this is an example of us bicycling over to pick it up. Now, composting system. So that's all sounds good. We're going to collect food, right? And we're going to process it locally. We're going to compost locally. Well, one of the things that happens with composting that turns people off composting is rodents. And the story I've heard is that we're never more than 10 feet from a rat. And I was just out staying at a house for my birthday week, which was last week, and I just was staying at a house at the Rincon, which was just a total joy, apart from at night when I heard the rats in the walls. So yeah, I was really thinking, oh yeah, I'm not more than 10 feet from a rat. And one of the standard ways that people tell you to make compost bins is this 3-bin technique. And this is actually from the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh in Scotland, and which is one of my favorite places on the planet to visit. But the compost program, they had these pallet bins. And the thing with pallets is that they provide this really ideal habitat for rats. So I don't advise people to use pallets. So we want to avoid, I mean, really, unless you're a big fan of rats, I think that probably we want to keep them out of our compost. And rats are very intelligent, got to say. But really, I think that one of the things we should be doing is keeping them out of a compost. So here's my compost bins, and I put wire under the bottom. I put half-inch hardware cloth under the bottom so that things can't tunnel into them. And I put half-inch hardware cloth around the top so that particularly cats can't get in, or raccoons or rats. And the issue with cats or raccoons is the E. coli concern, because you have fresh manures in your compost and then you're making compost tea out of it. That's not good. So I'm really careful about protecting my compost from critters. I don't want critters living any large critters living in my compost. And these bins, I so wish that these bins were commercially available now. They're the Smith and Hawken BioStack, and it's a fantastic design because you can take one of these levels off and move it and then turn the bin. I just did it the other day. Fantastic design. It was apparently sold to Target and then they discontinued it. There is the garden nerd in LA. She started like a demonstration against Target to get them to like make these bins again. And I've even taken one that they're flat pack and you can assemble them and make them, and it's a great thing. But I have not managed to get anybody to remake these bins. But however you do it with your bins, got to try and keep the rodents out, is what I think. Um, Perhaps this bin in the ground. It makes sense to put bins in the ground. Then they're isolated from critters. You can lock the lid. The biology is in contact with the soil. If this is in a bed, then that biology is going to be going out into the around into the soil. So this is an interesting design. I think that's worth pursuing. Um, what we like at schools, and it's not without its problems, but these are continual flow worm bins. And the worm bin itself, what was fantastic about this worm bin when we did it at a school is the unintended good consequences. And you should pay attention to unintended good consequences because those are symptoms of working in regenerative systems. So when you encounter an unintended good consequence, you are working in a regenerative system. And for instance, going to farmers markets, usually I have a conversation with somebody, I have no idea what it's going to be, but I usually make some kind of connection there. So that's an example. But these ones, we had salamanders and frogs turned up. The kids loved them. They're catching salamanders, catching frogs, and they were composting their food waste. And then actually under this one, it was very successful. We managed to grow oyster mushrooms under it. But
Oh,
these are continual flow bins that um, have a matrix of ropes underneath. So it's a bin with a hollow bottom, an open bottom. And then you can see my stepdaughter Jasmine putting carbon. This is at Nordhoff High School. She was a senior there. And putting carbon in there, sorry, cardboard in there, and that seals off the bottom. And then you can put straw. You can see we have the straw bale as a bedding. When it gets wet, it covered in bacteria. Worms love that. And then you can add your food to the top and keep layering worms and all. And eventually, what happens is that the compost breaks down and they self harvest. And in order to make sure that I'm not just making that a really cozy place for rats to live, is that I put this quarter-inch hardware cloth around it and I just lap it down and put pavers over it. So the rats didn't live in here; they lived over in the in the straw. So yeah, you're never more than 10 feet from a rat. But this is a very successful system. You can get big with this. This is Apricot Lanes. This is which I'm sure some of you have been to. They have a bespoke barn for their worm bin, and they have a machine that slices. They have a knife that goes along the bottom and cuts the stuff that's falling through, and you get high quality compost from your worm bin. You can build bins other ways. I like these bins that are made out of, it's called 6x6 or mini mat. It's actually concrete reinforcing wire. And then I line them with half-inch hardware cloth. And these seem to be pretty rodent proof. Haven't had many problems with them. But also notice here is a group, it's quite fantastic to make compost with your buddies. And this was actually a volunteer group from Patagonia. And a shout out to Ron Whitehurst, who's there. And I know some of you will know Ron. And Ron is at the Bug Farm, Rincon Vitova in Sector. And it's just, he and Jan are just total jewels and love them both. Notice that we named our piles, and it is important to have a relationship with your compost. So naming your pile is a good way to go. Highly recommend it. Uh, and getting them to come up to temperature, your goal is to get your compost to come up to above 131 is the magic number so that it's going to kill pathogens and weed seeds. Now, if you're careful about what you're putting in there, you may not have weed seeds. You may have pathogens, but you'd ideally have it remain at that temperature for like 3 days. You don't want it to get up above 165 because then you run into your problems of auto ignition. But if it's not up to 130, then you couldn't actually commercially sell it. But this bin design, we use it at the Ojai City demonstration garden, which I fondly call the OCD garden. And occasionally we have problem with very large animals coming and turning the pile. This was a bear turning this pile. And kind of made a mess of that one. But generally not an issue in backyards. This was out in a very rural area. I put that one in for fun, but yeah, it does happen. But this is where it gets fun. If you're composting at schools, then this is what I really love to do. This is an activity that is captivating for all age groups. Adults love it. Middle these are actually elementary school kids, but first graders love it. Everybody loves it. It is sieving compost, and I make these sieves.
Okay, somebody else take a go.
Me.
Somebody else take a go.
And what happens with that is that what goes through the mesh is biology and sieved stuff. On the top, they can find, there's treasures, there's trash, there's a lot of education can be done about plastics. And it is an amazing thing that I do a lot of education to fifth graders about plastics, and almost every class pretty much doesn't know that plastic is made of oil. And that may be the most important thing that they learn in that. But this activity, it's hands-on, and then we do this. And the kids are now finding critters.
What do you see?
Worms. The white one. Worms. The white one. There's a white one.
All larvae?
White larvae.
Nice.
And so we have compost critter worksheets that we give them a little petri dish, a mini petri dish, and a little hand lens, and then there's a sheet that tells them about them. They draw them and label them, and they inevitably name them and want to take them home. It's fun, but this is engaging, and it's connecting kids to nature. You don't need to lecture to these children to tell them that soil is alive. They are catching animals in it. They know it's alive. And then when you put these animals underneath that dissecting scope, it's quite impressive. So, this is just another example of, like, if you're a teacher and you have a class that's as engaged as this, it's so wonderful. Like, when a teacher can stand back and the whole class is engaged in the activity, that's a win. And this is a very engaging activity. And then we take those samples inside, and then the kids are looking at them under the microscope. And we can do the light microscope, a high power, which I'm interested in. Sometimes we find, we'll find nematodes, and they see those and they're moving, they're interested in. But when you're looking at the macroarthropods under the low power microscope, then suddenly a pill bug becomes, like 2 feet wide on the big screen. And classrooms have big screens now. And you can see the red worms, you can see the blood pumping through their bodies. That sort of thing is, and I know that we have kids that it engages them, and it's the beginning of, I believe, a lifelong connection to nature. So really important stuff. Now, so that's composting. We dealt with composting. We know about composting. Composting is important. We got to support composting at schools. There's so much food waste. Got to do that. So that's the we know about the importance of it. We know there's an issue, composting. Also, we also know about the healing effects of nature, and there's more and more evidence about this, that being in nature is important for our mental health, our physical health. It reduces stress. There's numerous things that nature does. So when you have schools like this, it's just delightful to be in a school. This is a private school in Ojai. This is the independent school, Oak Grove School, and it's their garden program. So delightful school, lovely to go to underneath mature oaks. However, a lot of the schools I go to look like this. And in a warming climate, this is pretty harsh to have your lunch out there. No shade, a lot of asphalt, a lot of brightness, not very inspiring. Looks a bit like a jail. Uh, Not uncommon. This is the simple ecosystems that we see repeated again and again and again at public school. Asphalt, grass, play structure, sometimes not even grass, sometimes not even a play structure. This is pretty grim. And this is an opportunity. Again, this is work that needs to be done. And really core to what I'm doing is connecting kids to nature. And I used to do it. I mean, I've run this program Once Upon a Watershed for 16 years now. And what we do is take kids out on field trips. We go into class, do a presentation. For instance, our fourth grade program is Story of Our Oaks. And then we take them out to a nature preserve and we plant acorns, and we allow them, we do activities that are connecting to nature. They get free exploration and that sort of thing. But now I really see that that's great for once a year, but the time where they're spending all their time is at school. And that's where we need the healing effects of nature. And we know that that reduces recidivism, it reduces absenteeism, it reduces all sorts of behavioral issues. And, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for this. These are the Rio schools. I love the whole the conspiracy theorists would be having fun with the stuff in the sky there, but nothing in the look at that. That is asphalt waiting to be punctured through and have trees planted. Or therefore, how about October? So October was an initiative I brought to to Ventura County, and it's taken off. The county actually is promoting October. We have October events, and this year I got a couple of grants to do oak regeneration in a preserve in Ojai. We're going to be bringing students to plant oak trees. In fact, I'm starting. We've got a lot of oak trees started in pots. Um, but really, the most effective thing for planting oaks is to just collect acorns. And at times there's a lot of acorns out there. And if you just keep them moist enough, they start sprouting. You stick those acorns in the ground, then, that's an acorn that grows in the ground is going to be the healthiest thing. It's very hard to transplant plants out of pots. And it's much easier just to put an acorn in the ground. And the first time I did this was in 1997 in Happy Valley School in the Upper Ojai, an independent school, and I can go and visit oak trees now that are above head height, and it's really, really, really delightful. It's a wonderful thing to plant trees and then go back and visit them 10, 20, 30 years in the future. Um,
Uh,
Here we've got this is oak planting at Nordhoff School, and this was actually supported by a collaboration with the Turtle Conservancy in town. So there are folks that will support Oaktober and support planting. We worked very well with the grounds and maintenance, installed irrigation, and these trees are doing very well. Interestingly, I want to point out this is an initiative that the school district pulled off, the Ojai Unified. They planted these trees in asphalt playground, and these are Quercus engelmanni. These are Engelmann oak, and they are viewed as being the most climate adapted because they grow up. Their natural habitat is up to about Pasadena. And my dear friend Dave Muffley, whose website is oaktopia.org, he's the one that he's got 40 years of experience of oak regeneration and really promotes these and some other trees too. But so we planted Engelmann oaks at some of the schools there.
wow.
Interesting. I attended a workshop that was actually about soils for planting trees at schools. And again, it's about incorporating organics into the subsoil. If when you have construction done You have asphalt down over time. There's a lot of compaction happens. You need to have organics in there. So if you ever are in the situation where you're taking hardscape off and planting, you want to excavate and mix in some organics in there too. Another thing we do is we support native habitat at schools, and we create these signs which have a QR code that go to a database on our website. This is hummingbird sage, beautiful understory plant. And we're really trying to raise more awareness about native plants and their uses at schools. And if you have this sign, then in theory, it can be an educational add-on that kids can learn the name and they can go and do some research on it. You can do seed saving, for instance, with these plants too. School gardens can look great. This is Sheridan Way, which is one of the Ventura Unified Schools. It's actually the most needy school that we work with. I think it's 100% free and reduced lunch. It's 89% Hispanic, a lot of first generation English learners. Um, this was the garden in 2018. Oops. This is what the garden looks like today. And that's because Ventura Unified axed its garden education program. So we have been filling in. I got some funding. I was very fortunate to connect with some funders who have provided funding for soils education and to support school gardens. We haven't managed to get into this garden yet because Ventura Unified is not a very easy district to work with. But we support De Anza Middle School, Will Rogers, and Sunset. That's three school gardens in the Ventura Unified School District. But there's opportunity, and it's so sad. One of the things I know about this garden is that there's not really a place to sit. You really need places in gardens to sit. Key thing of garden design. You need a place for the humans. It can't just be a pass through. Got to have seats. Anyway, this one kind of sad. Oops, I keep on pushing the wrong. But some schools have it nailed. This is in the Carpinteria Unified School District. This is Aliso Elementary. Very beautiful, mixed perennial herbs, some edibles, lots of flowers. And then I really like the simplicity of their outdoor classroom. This is a very simple thing. It has a blackboard, it has a table, and it has some rounds of wood that are probably fairly easy to get a hold of. But inspiring stuff, natural habitat in the school garden. This is so if you're imagining, and I really want you to imagine the perfect environment. It would be overstory oak trees. So we got to plant oaks. It would be edible food gardens. So we got to support those. It would be rainwater gardens because we need to infiltrate rain into the ground. And we need food forests. And this is a food forest that we installed at a school in the Ocean View district. And this actually was right after COVID. I went to visit it. And amazingly enough, some of those things survived. Um,
Oh,
gives
good.
gives me hope. Gives me hope. And this is Rio del Sol, a really nice school. It's a magnet school in the Rio district. And yeah, look, they're putting effort into that. That's pretty delightful. And here we are doing lessons in the garden. And what we're trying to do is find the teachers that really want to green their schools and give them support. You could even have a compost tea party like we do at the Rio District. And so I'm not going to talk too much about compost tea, but you can take your compost, and usually people make not very much compost. But if you put it in liquid and stir it around a 5-gallon bucket, it spreads a lot further. So, making a liquid extract of your compost, very simple to do. You want to put some foods in there, put some liquid kelp in it, or put some liquid fish hydrolysate. Marino is from Get Hooked Seafood is a locally sourced fish hydrolysate. Highly recommend you look them up. But we've been doing these compost tea parties where the whole school gets involved and we have multiple nature-based activities for kids. And the beautiful thing about compost tea is it's liquid carbon. You are putting the biology in your compost in a liquid form around the plants. And so this is so important for soils that have been in any way treated with Roundup or chemical fertilizers. Finally, I got to say, it's really a joyful thing to plant trees at school. This stick here you see is now this.
Oh,
What were you picking today?
Let's hear Pakistani mulberries. All right. I think that's all I got. So I'm really curious to hear what questions, but thank you for your time.
oh, I loved it. Um, Now, Elizabeth was wonderful, and she asked, how do I get termites out of my compost? Some
Termite.
mulch was used at a community garden that seems to have contained wood with termites.
Hmm. Don't they just hatch and fly away? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I've never encountered termites, a termite problem. You know, I guess it's a problem if they get into your house, but I don't know. How would you deal with termites? I guess turn it is always the thing, and try and incorporate more. Just use it to start another pile. I would say turn it, but I have not. That is a new question to me. I've never heard that question before.
She said sometimes you can purchase the Smith and Hawkins compost bins on Marketplace.
Ah, keep an eye out for those. They are worth their weight in gold. They're really the best bins that I encounter. You know, I at the Ojai City Demonstration Garden, we used to have a all different American composters and rotating bins and all sorts of things. The problem with them is that they don't generally get big enough for it to go thermal. You know, most bins, backyard compost bins, are pretty small. But if you've got worms, then that doesn't matter. You're just doing vermicomposting. So in a smaller bin, you really want to make sure you've got red wiggler worms and keep it moist. Again, the key thing, life, water. You got to keep your compost moist. It'll break down very slowly if it's dried out. But yeah, you add water, and I didn't have the chance to put the video in, but if it gets really wet, then you get soldier fly larvae. And soldier flies don't sting and they don't bite. And the larvae, well, they're delicious if you're a chicken.
Oh, could you please say what was a good local source of fish
Oh, right,
hydrolase?
hydrolysate. So it is Get Hooked Seafood. They're based in Carpinteria, and they have really put a lot of effort into they you can subscribe for seafood from them, and it's delicious. A lot of it's landed
Dead
very
fruit?
locally. Get Hooked Seafood, and um, and their fish hydrolysate is called, I think it's called merino. Hold on a second, I'll go get it. I'll show you.
Oh, I think he said dead fruit.
Didn't have to go very far. Here's a gallon of, can you see it? Oops, merino. And that's the fish hydrolysate that I'd recommend, because if you buy fish hydrolysate like from Peaceful Valley Farm Supply, and I bought it for years, chances are it comes from fish farms. And fish farms are just not great ecology. They are a major nuisance. They can be really a drag. So supporting something that's taking it from a sustainable fishery is really important. And Get Hooked Seafood is primarily taking from the Santa Barbara Channel, and that's a sustainable fishery. So highly recommend that. And the other liquid food that I use is liquid kelp, and I haven't found a local source for that. But you know there are various kelp, like maxi crop is a dried version of that. But liquid kelp, actually, if you've got a sick plant, this the the easiest treatment that you can do is a dilute liquid kelp spray, foliar spray, because plants have stomata, they take that nutrient in, and that's the fastest way that you can feed a plant. I had actually that school that had the Quercus engelmann oaks planted. They planted 9 of them and they looked terrible. And I told them just get out right out there and spray them with liquid kelp. And then I went and did a compost tea treatment to them like 2 weeks later, and they all had fresh growth on them. It was quite incredible actually. I that was quite something. So yeah, liquid kelp. It's another good food.
Uh, what about engaging the local community colleges to help at the schools?
It's primarily the way we do that. Like the subtext to what I do with my work is connecting kids to nature, but it's also providing work for environmental educators. And several of our educators have come from Cal State Channel Islands. We actually
Drive?
Cal State Channel Islands, and we have like Camilla Guzman, who went through Cal State Channel Islands. She invented a persona for herself there, the Queen of Compost. And
Oh,
some of you may have encountered Camilla
yes, yes.
as the Queen of Compost. So she's a colleague and bilingual educator, and she has just had a child who's called Marina. Yeah, not Marino, Marina.
So anyone else want to put a question in the chat?
Definitely, I encourage you, and I got to compliment you, Diana, on the both the work you do promoting stuff on Instagram. There's very interesting posts that you put out there. I've screenshotted quite a few of them, and they're inspiring. And then also just for your work as a garden club in general. And I know that you support school garden programs, and it is such important work. And really developing relationships at the board level is probably the most important thing. We have done that successfully at the Rio District and in Ojai. Ventura is a challenge. We do have an MOU with them, but yeah, just pretty challenging. And I have to raise the money to pay my staff to do that. So uh, all of these things is kind of work I get up to.
Would you recommend any other mycorrhizae for crops beside the dead man's foot?
That's a good question. I happen to have here the mycorrhizal mix that I use. And this is a
Oh,
bunch of generalist mycorrhizae, but this is imported from Spain, and it costs me $250 for a kilogram.
oh
So
my.
it's very high quality. You look it under the microscope, and there's a lot of mycorrhizae there. It's one of the things that is a little bit suspicious about, for instance, you can go to, I'm sure you can go to your local garden center and you'll find bagged compost that'll say with mycorrhizae, but it doesn't say how much mycorrhizae, so it doesn't have to be very much mycorrhizae for it to say there's mycorrhizae in there.
Yeah.
Generally, when we've looked at mycorrhizae samples, this Bioradis Sol is the best one that I use. So if I have if I'm being asked to create a compost tea brew for uh, somebody who's going to direct inject into the ground around trees, I will add Bioradis Sol, and if it's an oak tree, I'll put in the Pisolithus, the dead man's foot spores too. And not all plants have mycorrhizal associations. 80% of plants do, but and it's like brassicas don't. And so that's the annuals don't have mycorrhizal relationships. Uh,
Hmm.
they're missing out, but they're annuals. So that's where you can use your molasses and yeah, stir your compost up with a little bit of sugar and feed your annuals.
What is your advice on growing tomatoes in clay soil that has not been amended with organic material? The plants have yellow and leaves and look sickly. Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, a lot of different things. It could be a lot of different things, but the yellowing could reflect compaction. It could reflect flooding. It could reflect a mineral deficiency. And so, if there's rock dusts, perhaps could help. But the using making plant extracts is a pretty interesting thing to get into. Plant extracts of nettle, for instance. I mean, nettle is a very interesting plant. I love growing nettle and I love harvesting nettle, and I particularly like making nettle pesto. You just have to put the nettle in boiling water for about a minute and it bursts all the spicules. But it really is a dynamic accumulator. And so if you make a ferment, uh, then you can put the nettle into liquid. You can chop it up, put it into liquid, and give it some sugar, and then it will ferment. And then you can use that ferment to treat your plants. So it might be again if you've got sickly plants, again trying that simple thing of spraying it with liquid kelp. Uh, Maybe you can find somebody or make an extract and try spraying an extract. With tomatoes, the interesting thing is, you probably all know this, that you can plant them lengthwise and then they all sprout up. You can make hedges out of them. It depends how much space you've got. But maybe you need to add some organic material to your soils next year.
Yeah.
And then grow them with basil. They love growing with basil. But tomatoes are quite incredible. They're so vigorous. I have them in places where I've got a lot of Bermuda grass, still get tomatoes growing through them. So yeah,
Nice.
more power to your nightshade, I guess.
Do you have a favorite compost recipe in terms of greens and browns? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely the basic thing that sort of beginner composters, the mistake they make is they just have greens and it just becomes this putrefying pile of anaerobic smelliness. And so you got to balance your greens and your browns. And I like using native inputs for my browns, and I'm fortunate that I live underneath oak trees, so I use oak leaves, a lot of oak leaves, as my brown layer. And I really just visualize it sort of as 50-50. I put a layer of green, put a layer of brown. And if you're composting from your food waste from your house, you know, if you do your composting every day or every second day, then you've got a thin layer, and then you put your brown on top, and then you water it, and then you put your next layer on top. So it's roughly the same amount of green and brown is
what do you
is
think
what I do.
about cardboard?
Cardboard, it's an interesting thing to add. You definitely want to soak your cardboard for at least 24 hours. You could probably soak it for 48, even 72 hours. If you soak it for much more, it starts to fall apart. But if you do it for at least a day, then cardboard becomes it's coated with bacteria, and that's food for your worms. And corrugated cardboard is kind of like an adventure playground for worms. My friend Bill Palmisano, he has a methodology for cutting up the banana boxes, and he actually stacks them vertically in his worm bins. And so the water can get in through the corrugations. And yeah, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of cardboard out there. I would be wary of cardboard that has dyes on it. Um, and I just was on a webinar which was about like industrial composting and contaminants, and their advice was only compost things that say they are certified compostable. However, I know that locally our yard waste is saying we can put anything that's like pizza boxes. You can put pizza boxes in there. I would only use brown cardboard. I wouldn't use cardboard that's got dyes on it. But if you've got brown cardboard and there's a lot of it coming into our lives, and then you soak it, you could cut it into strips and use it as your carbon source. But just soak it for at least a day.
What about foliar seeding? But you're recommending the kelp. Anything else?
You know that you can get like at my local hardware store, they have these little pump sprayers that are like a gallon, and they're inexpensive. They're like $25 or something, and they are great. And so, yeah, I just do like a capful or a small amount. Look at what they recommend, and they always recommend you use more than you really need. But yeah, liquid kelp is a good one. You could use humic acid. You could use humates. And I buy humic acid. It's ideal. It's very hard to get humic acid that isn't from Leonardite, and they extract that using hydrochloric acid. But you can make it yourself. If you've got compost and you pour water through your compost, then that liquid that comes out, spray that on your plants. They
Yeah.
actually talk. I've actually seen reference to this, and I sort of do it anyway. Is that if you find a worms? Oh, you know what is it? The collective term for red worms is a squirm of worms. And if you've ever composted, you probably have found a pile of worms. That's a squirm. And if you put those in water, then worm bath is supposed to be really high quality. So you can bathe your worms. You don't want to drown them. You want to put them back in the compost, but then use that liquid too. So there's all sorts of things you can do yourself that, you can make a liquid extract of your compost, and that'll have, especially if it's the color, if your compost is the color of 70% dark chocolate, that means you've got humic acid in it, and that humate would be a good thing to spray.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. Anyone else have any other questions? Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being organic gardeners, and I hope you can connect with your local schools and inspire the next generation of organic gardeners. And food bribery is a key way to go with that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, the one last question is,
Oh
do
yeah.
you create your own teas? Yes, I know he does.
Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah. So I make actually aerated compost teas, and I do that pretty regularly. I have brewers, and it's I pump air through the brewers, and the air is to disperse the biology on the soil pads. So it's not about aeration; it's about active, like a rolling boil. So yeah, sometimes you get people who think that your aeration is about like an aquarium stone or something. It's I've got a friend actually who makes compost extracts in an old washing machine. He puts the compost in the washing machine, and yeah, he gets an extra. People use actually Apricot Lanes has moved more to using a slurry, so they're sort of making a heavy duty liquid compost spray, but it depends how much compost you've
Right.
got. But liquid extract of your compost, the difference between an extract is just the compost put in a liquid. An actively aerated compost tea has been nurtured for or brewed for like a day, and it's had some foods added too. So you're growing the population of biology, but an extract, you can put the food in the extract as you add it to the ground, and so you can be feeding your plants directly.
Well, thank you so much. You can send Dr. David hearts and thank yous from your react button at the bottom if you like. See what I did? Yes, yes, you can do it. That's it. Thank you, David. We love you, and thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate you all coming here, and you'll be able to see, oh, look at all these hearts. Nice. And you'll be able to see a replay of this. I appreciate you. Love you all. Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
Diana.
night, everyone. Thank you, doctor. Good night.
Good night.